Week 11 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few wide receivers I looked at off the wire this week. The first receiver, Ricky Pearsall with the San Francisco 49ers. I mentioned Pearsall last week on the stash list, and he went out there and had a nice ball game in the victory at the Bucs. 4 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown. So this team, they're going to operate 3 receiver sets. We saw Juwan Jennings have a nice ball game as well. Deebo Samuel made some plays when he had to, and Ricky Pearsall out there right now in 63% of leagues. So the last few games for Pearsall since he returned getting shot in training camp. Week 7 versus the Chiefs, 3 catches, 21 yards. Week 8 versus the Cowboys, a carry, 39 yards, 4 catches, 38 yards. And Week 10 in Tampa Bay, 4 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown on a nice 46-yard touchdown. So Pearsall was a first-round pick for a reason. We know Brandon Ayuk, he's out for the season. And next man up for the San Francisco 49er team. And Pearsall and Juwan Jennings both did good jobs in this ball game. So right now, while he's out there, still in a decent amount of fantasy leagues, and we know his playmaking ability, and him and Purdy had a decent rapport, I thought. Pearsall is definitely a good ad, and he's got a good matchup coming up in Week 11 for the Seahawks. I give up the 9th most fantasy points to receivers on the season, so definitely a wide out to head this week. Next receiver, Judy of the Cleveland Browns. So right now, you could go out there on the waiver wire and get Jerry Jeudy out there in 55% of fantasy leagues. We know this Brown team, they were on bye, and Jerry Jeudy and Tillman pretty much the 1 and 2 wide receivers over there for this Cleveland Brown team. Since the Amari Cooper trade, Week 8 versus Baltimore, 5 catches, 79 yards, and Week 8 versus the Chargers, 7 catches, 73 yards, 11 targets. So playing with the gunslinger and Jameis Winston, you're going to get a lot of targets, be a lot of opportunities to work down the field and middle of the field. And Jerry Jeudy, he just likes playing that street ball type of football. We saw it in college, and we didn't see it much over there in Denver, but now with this Cleveland Brown team, where they're going to be trailing a lot this season, and Jameis Winston is the ultimate gunslinger. I think Jerry Jeudy, it's going to pay dividends for him, and definitely fantasy owners. So right now, like I said, where you could get him off the waiver wire right now, well, he's on bye week, and until tomorrow he goes on waivers, is Jerry Jeudy. This is a perfect time to pick him up, available in 55% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Rashad Bateman of the Baltimore Ravens. But when Deontay Johnson got traded to Baltimore, we're going to see him step right in and have a big role, but obviously that hasn't been the case in the first couple weeks since he got traded to the Baltimore Ravens. So Rashad Bateman out there in 71% of fantasy leagues. He's still a great target of Lamar Jackson, and last week he had a bounce-back game, 6 catches, 54 yards, and a touchdown. So Week 11, another division matchup, this time with the Steelers. And this Pittsburgh team, if you got to get in a shootout with them, it's going to happen, I believe, in this game. We saw Pittsburgh and the Commanders go up and down the field against each other last week. So I wouldn't be surprised if Baltimore finds themselves in another high-scoring ball game with the Pittsburgh Steelers going into Week 11. And Rashad Bateman, he's a good deep ball threat. I just want to see a little more consistency and more targets his way. And that's definitely what he did in Week 10, where the targets were there with 8. He had the 6 catches, and he wasn't a deep ball or nothing. So right now, while he's out there, like I said, in 71% of fantasy leagues, I definitely will give him an ad this week. Next ad, Mike Williams of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Williams, he was just acquired by the Pittsburgh Steelers early last week from the New York Jets, and he had a big touchdown, the go-ahead touchdown for the Pittsburgh Steelers to put him up ahead. So he had 1 catch, the big one of the game, 32-yard touchdown. So Mike Williams, we know he's a deep ball threat going back with the Los Angeles Chargers for many seasons. Then in the offseason, coming off the torn ACL early last year with the New York Jets, they just didn't find use for Mike Williams much, was the New York Jets. And Aaron Rodgers, he wasn't happy with Mike Williams. He blamed end of one of those ball games on a Monday night versus the Buffalo Bills early in the season. And now here with Pittsburgh, he was the hero in that ball game with the Washington Commanders. So Mike Williams, we know he's a deep ball threat. We know he's an athletic wide receiver, and he's going to fit this Pittsburgh offense well, where we know Russell Wilson always likes those deep ball threats and likes airing the football out. They're a good play to win the ball game for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and obviously not knowing the playbook, I think Mike Williams, as the weeks go on, is going to get more in the playbook. He's going to get more playing time, and right now I believe he's a decent ad, and he's available right now, Mike Williams, in 82% of fantasy leagues, because him and Wilson, if they could get on the same page, I think we could see some good ball games like we have throughout Williams' career with the Los Angeles Chargers. Next wide receiver I looked at off the wires, Alec Pierce of the Indianapolis Colts. Also Michael Pittman, he's banged up with a back injury and other ailments as well. And Alec Pierce, he stepped in and had a good ball game in the loss. 4 catches, 81 yards, and found the end zone, available in 85% of fantasy leagues. And we've seen some flashes from Pierce, but he's been a more deep ball threat and nothing. But at least this offense has been way better in terms of fantasy football production, with Joe Flacco on the center than Anthony Richardson this season for the Indianapolis Colts. So Week 11 coming up at the New York Jets. Not the greatest of matchups on paper, but this Jet team, they really haven't stopped anyone over the last few weeks here defensively, besides the Houston Texans that 1 week, even though we saw Tank Dell in Week 9 versus Jet defense go for 6 for 126 and found the end zone. So if Pittman's out once again, I think Alec Pierce gets some decent value in 12-team leagues or deeper. And like I said, him and Joe Flacco have a good rapport for the most part, and he's a nice deep ball threat for this Indianapolis Colts team. Next wide receiver is Valdez-Scantling of the New Orleans Saints. So with this same team decimated at the wide receiver position, Chris Olave, he's out with a concussion at least 3 more games. We know Shaheed got hurt early in the season, out for the season. And Valdez-Scantling, he stepped up and he was the deep ball threat, having a monster performance, even though I thought it was fluky versus the Falcons. 3 catches, 109 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So I'm not saying those numbers are going to happen again, but right now he's operating as that number 1-2 wide receiver for this New Orleans Saints team. I know Tipton's over there as well. I know Cedric Wilson, but Valdez-Scantling's going to be that deep ball threat, replacing Rashid Shaheed, what he did over there. I'm not saying he's going to put up the same numbers as Shaheed, but I'm just saying the position on the field. And we know Derek Carr likes to air it out on times and gets that football down the field. So this week, a pretty good matchup coming up versus the Browns. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. Valdez-Scantling, we know he's a deep ball nothing throughout his NFL career, but like I said, he's getting an opportunity right now for this New Orleans Saints team. And with him out there, they actually won a ball game after losing 7 in a row. So if you need a receiver in deeper leagues with 4 teams on bye, Valdez-Scantling out there, 99% of fantasy leagues. And the final wide receiver I have as an ad this week is Matt Collins of the Buffalo Bills. So this is going to be a high-scoring game this week with the Chiefs, and we'll see if this Buffalo Bill team can knock off Kansas City at home as Buffalo. We know these two teams have a heated rivalry over the last few seasons in the playoffs and all that. So Matt Collins, the last couple weeks, he's had an expanded role, and he stepped up and making plays. He's a deep ball threat, and he's a big target in this offense. Week 9 versus Miami, 5 catches, 30 yards, found the end zone. In Week 10 at Indianapolis, 4 catches, 86 yards. So Amari Cooper, he's been out with a wrist injury, and they acquired him a few weeks ago in a deal from the Browns. We'll see if he plays in Week 11. And Keon Coleman, he's most likely out a couple more weeks as well with his wrist injury. So either way, Matt Collins, he's going to be operating in this offense. He's a big target, like I said, in the deep ball threat. And Josh Allen and Hollins over the last couple weeks, they're definitely building a rapport. Another wide receiver out there in 99% of fantasy leagues. Another journeyman who's bounced around, no doubt about it, in the NFL. But I like Matt Collins as a target for Josh Allen, and I think he can help fantasy owners in 12-team leagues or deeper. So that's a few wide receivers I looked at off the wire for Week 11 of the fantasy football season.